Welcome to the Fight Monsters podcast. Today we're talking to real people fighting real monsters.
Fight monsters, fight monsters. You're listening to the Fight Monsters podcast.
All right, welcome to the Fight Monster Show. I'm your host, Steven Norberg, and I'm especially excited about our episode today. We're doing something a little bit different, and we're talking about the theme of endurance. And to help us out, we've got a special guest, Alex. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Norberg. I hope it's all right if I call him Norberg. That's how I know him because we actually swam for the same college swim team, and I was a recruit on for the Harvard team my senior year of high school when Norberg was a senior. So we very briefly overlapped, and a few times after that. But I've always known him as Norberg, and that's what I'm gonna call you. So thanks for having me on. I'm pumped to see you again and catch up a little bit and to talk about today's topic.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So in thinking about our conversation, I was thinking about some previous conversations, just talking to people about different monsters. And I know that we all have monsters in our life, and many of them look differently. And I've come to really believe that endurance is one of the secret weapons to battling anything that comes our way in life, any of the sources of adversity, any monster, anything that's tough. And that's why I'm excited to be talking to you about endurance. Your background is as a former professional endurance athlete, world champion, Olympian, swimmer extraordinaire. Can you tell us a little bit about the sport of endurance swimming, open water swimming, and how you got into it?
First off, I think that you have a very salient point there about endurance being a very fundamental part of really any adventure of any kind, whether it's building a business or being an athlete. Even if you're a short, like a sprinter type of athlete, you think of it like a career long type of endurance, or just really like all of us are going to encounter hardships in life that last probably longer than we want them to. So, and having endurance, whether it's physical or emotional or mental or whatever, is I think applicable to everyone at some time in their life. So, my most obvious experience with that has been through my sport. So, I was an open water. So, I mean, I swam in. I was like a traditional pool swimmer, like all my life and through my youth and through college and everything. And I was a distance swimmer, and the longest event that they have in a pool is a mile, which to a lot of people probably seems very short or very long. But to me, it felt relatively short because I just always, it's kind of like could never really go out fast enough. It was always kind of getting going just at the end of a mile. So I was always very curious and eventually became very serious about open water swimming and the open water, or also known as marathon swimming. And the Olympic event is a 10-kilometer race, which is about 6.2 miles or so. So I really got turned on to it when I was like a young teenager, and my high school coach, Roy, used to tell. He was a big storyteller. He was kind of an older guy and used to like to talk about the 60s and 70s and the golden years and how everything was so much better back then and all that. But one of my favorite stories that he told, because he could like really get going on a roll for a while sometimes, was about a swimmer that he had named Claire DeBoer, who swam the length of Cayuga Lake, which is the inlet of Cayuga Lake. The south end is in Ithaca, New York, which is where I grew up. You've probably been there a few times to swim against at Teagle Hall against Cornell, but the thing is, it's like 40 miles long. It's really long, and he would sometimes occasionally before practice time, tell us this epic story about Claire starting in the middle of the night, and she's got to jump off a bridge, and there was a lightning storm, and then there was a helicopter that almost like disqualified her swim because it was like the wind was aiding her. And then there were issues where they're like with their nutrition, like was curdling inside the cooler that they brought because it had been too long. So I was like, wow, this doesn't happen in like a 500 freestyle. Like you never get like stuff like this. So I was always not only was it a great way to eat up like 45 minutes of practice time, but I was just really captivated by this story. And that really sparked my interest in open water. And there honestly wasn't a whole lot of opportunity in upstate New York when I was growing up because, well, just simply because of the seasons. Like there's only a few months out of the year that you can actually swim the lake. But also just the level of competition. Like there were just kind of like, like masters type, like weekend warrior events going on in the area, but not even that many of them. So I really got into it when, towards the end of high school and then more into college. And eventually I made my first national team, I think between my junior and senior year of college. And that was kind of like my aha moment, kind of where I realized that, hey, I'm pretty good at the mile, but I'm probably not going to like make a world championship team or an Olympic team but like this open water thing is relatively new. And, I've always felt like a mile was a little too short for me. So like, and I just love the outdoors and nature and all that. So it all kind of fit together for me. And fortunately my coach, Tim Murphy at Harvard was very supportive of me doing that and let me focus on that a little bit more in the summertime. And one thing led to another. And I after I graduated college in 2010, I did that for my career for another 6 years or so. Yeah, and in that time, I was on I think maybe five world championship teams, one Olympic team, and yeah, won a few international medals, and just had a really really great experience with it. Yeah, lots of ups and downs. A lot of heartbreak and a lot of triumph, and but that's kind of just what life is. So, yeah, I look back with very fond memories.
Yeah, that's right. Well, before we get into some of your races, I wanted to share my personal experience with open water swimming, which was very positive. When I was about 15, coach of my club team took us out to a lake occasionally in the summer, and after the first time, we realized that he couldn't see us when we went around the cove. And so about half the time we just swim across the lake to the dock and like hang out for 45 minutes and swim back, and he would think that we were doing the entire perimeter. So I think he wised up after a while because we stopped doing the open water swims. But as a shorter distance, mid-distance swimmer, that was my highlight and my brief experience with open water swimming. Yeah.
I can't say I wouldn't have done the same thing if I were you.
Exactly, yeah. I did perfect the belly flop that summer. Still one of my claims to fame in this world. But yeah.
Nice.
So I wanted to start maybe in 2010. I know that was at the World Champs, kind of your first really big international scene race, I think it was, that was pretty memorable in talking to you. And I'd love if you could just share a little bit about that and kind of what happened and what you learned from that experience.
Yeah. So, well, I guess the 2010 summer is really put in perspective by the 2009 summer. So I'll touch on that briefly, that was the summer after my junior year of college. I did this USA Swimming Select camp, which is basically they pick a handful of like good milers and say, hey, do you want to learn some open water stuff and come down to Florida for a few days, and then it leads right into the national championships. And they had a guy named Mark Workington there who was our 10K Olympian from 2008 Beijing Games. And I had a really, really great experience just learning. Like, I didn't realize there was so much in terms of like tactics and strategy about the sport. And that was just totally up my alley. I ate it up. I thought it was so interesting and really fun. And I learned a lot from him and all the coaches that were there as well. And then it went right into the 2009 national championships where I did my first ever 10K. I always went down there and did the 5K, but I never did the 10K. I don't know, maybe I was scared or whatever, but I did my first 10K. I ended up getting fourth place. And as I'm coming out of the water, they're like, "Hey, congrats on making the team." I was like, "What team?" They're like, "Yeah, the national team. Like, you're going to Rome. You're going to the World Championships." I was like, "Holy!" I didn't even like it. I was that like green that I didn't even really understand how everything worked. So, and I actually had I had a summer uh, like educational opportunity lined up for me, so I kind of already had my summer plan. But they're like, "Oh, you can go to Rome," and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." It was kind of a hard decision, but I was like, "Man, I've been wanting to do this for so long. Like this is a huge opportunity. Like I would love to go to Rome and swim a 10K." And they're like, "Oh, no, 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 no. You got fourth place. Like the first place and second place people get to swim the 10K. You got selected for the 25K." And I was like, "Wow, dude, I just swam my first 10K, and now you want me to go to Rome and swim in 25K at the World Championships? Sure, why not?" So that was really my introduction to the kind of next level of open water competition. Was in Rome at those World Championships, and a lot of other stuff happened there. We could go on and on forever, but I was swimming this 25K, and I learned that there are a lot of differences in kind of the etiquette and the way people swim with each other in the pack, and it was just very different, not only from domestic U.S. races, but also from 10Ks as well. And I basically, at one point, someone came up to me and was physical with me in a very inappropriate way that I was like totally shocked by. I was like, "Wow, is this how this game is played around? Like, am I now like with the big dogs, and this is like how it works or whatever?" So I was like very very shocked by that, and anyway, this is like an hour into the race, and I'm like, why are you even going there? We have like 4.5 hours to go in this thing. But anyway, I kind of move on, and this race it's like beating down sun, very high salinity in the water there, so it's really salty, which makes you more buoyant, but also like there's more chafing and there's more like water in your eyes kind of hurts. Tons of jellyfish that were stinging like crazy, so that was really difficult. I also had never done a race that long, so this may sound kind of silly, but like I was having a really hard time like urinating while swimming, which I don't know if you ever like were born had that gene, Norberg, that where you could just do that like during practice, but like I can't. I'm really bad. I'm not good at that, and it's actually something that you do need to master if you're doing longer races, because if you just have to sit there and tread water, like you're just going to lose 100 meters on the pack every time that happens, right? And over 5.5 hours, 6 hours, that's going to happen multiple times. So anyway, it was just like very, very new experience for me, different than anything I'd ever had. Kind of falling back, catching up, falling back, catching up. Anyway, I was rounding I was doing well, and I was in like three people had broken away, and they were just off. I was basically in a solid in fourth position, and because the waves were so big, I accidentally like rounding the last buoy with maybe 1,500 meters to go in the race. I ran right into a girl. Her name was Shelley Clark. I actually knew her. She's an Australian swimmer. Because they'll actually put the men's and the women's. They'll stagger them. So it's a big course. It's like 2,500. It's half an hour around. So they'll send the men and they'll send the women maybe 5 minutes behind. And at some point, probably a few of them will get lapped, but not many. So it doesn't really cause much of a problem. So I ran into her, didn't think anything of it. 10 minutes later, I get a red card, basically with like 100. I can see the finish line. I get a red card with 100 meters to go, saying you're out, basically. And I didn't want to be that guy who just like swam through the finish. So I walked down the beach to back to my teammates, and I was like really really frustrated. And I found out that the guy who won, Valerio Clary, was the guy who I had an altercation with early in the race. So that fired me up even more. But fast forward to 2010, I was bummed out because I got fourth at our national, so I didn't qualify to make the 10K, which is kind of the premier event now that that's like in the Olympics and everything. But I got to do the 25K again, and I, despite getting disqualified the year before, I felt actually pretty empowered by that experience. You know, thinking that, hey, I finished the thing. I basically got fourth place my first time ever, so you know it's not too bad. And Valerio is like the reigning world champion in the 25K from the year before, and he'd also won the 10K a few days before. So he's like the man at this point. So, and I like, have an axe to grind with him because of what happened the year before. So we start the 25K race, and it's usually pretty chill for the first 3 hours or so. You're just kind of cruising around, and eventually it gets to the point where he has broken away by like 45 seconds or something like that. And I, at this point, am trying to like rally other people. This is similar to like anyone who's watched cycling. There's a lot of like pack dynamics and drafting and stuff like that. So I'm trying to like get some people to come with me to catch up to this guy. And no one was up for it. Like everyone was pretty gassed because it was a pretty hard race up to that point. So I just kind of went it alone, and I caught up to him after about half an hour or so of like pushing really hard. And I just started drafting off of him. And you know what that's like when you're going 5 seconds between each other, pushing off the wall, like you catch up a little bit to someone, it's just like smooth sailing. You don't even have to try. So I was just tucked right behind him, and I was doing that. And after about 10 minutes or so, like typically you don't just let someone drag off you. You kind of like, at least if you're trying to make a breakaway, you alternate or something like that, work together, or just like separate. And I realized, I was like, you know what? I actually, and also knowing the kind of person he was, I was like, I don't think he knows that I'm here. I think he thinks that he got so far away that didn't even bother to look back, called the race before it was over. There's a lesson there, and was just kind of cruising along. And I was like, you know what? I should probably just try not to touch his feet, because if I touch his feet, it's pretty obvious that I'm here. So that worked for about another 10 minutes. And then I like literally like my pinky finger touched his like pinky toe. The guy stops immediately in his tracks, turns around and looks at me, and like, he's an intimidating looking guy. Like there have been few people that I am like legitimately afraid of and just like make me shrink. There were probably 2 or 3 of those people in my career that I was that scared of. He was definitely one of them. And I remember that moment. I'll never forget that moment. And I was basically like, okay, I'll take the lead now here, bud. And this is like the last lap at this point. So we've got 30 minutes to go, and we're way ahead of everyone else. And we kind of go around the far end of the course, and we're coming down like the home stretch. So like now we've got like 15 minutes to go. And I remember consciously trying to make an effort to like, all right, I'm gonna beat him now. Like I'm just gonna get a big enough gap where he gives up, and then I can kind of do what he thought he was doing before, and just mail it into the finish. And every time I tried to speed up, it's just like I had nothing left. I was like running on fumes. So it ends up coming down to like the last 200 meters, we go around this buoy at the same time where you have to kind of make a left-hand turn around this thing. And then you see the finish line. And this is also in Roberval, Canada, where there's a whole other story there, but there's a ton of people at the finish. It's like their sport, their favorite sport is open water swimming. Like there's another event that they host that's like their Super Bowl. It's incredible. And anyway, he goes around first, and I'm right behind him. And it was like this zigging, zagging. Like I tried to go up one way, and he cut me off. I tried to go the other way, and he cut me off. And I eventually was able to just like pull it out and just kind of go around him, because I think at that point he was more focused on where I was relative to him instead of where he was relative to the finish line. So he lost track of the finish line and was focused on me, whereas I was kind of working both. and kind of just scooted around him and beat him by like a second in a 5 hour and 40-minute race or something like that, which was very, very satisfying for me. And that was really my first like big win, and the first time where I really was like, okay, maybe we can actually like make a career out of this. Like maybe like the Olympics are like, that's not a pipe dream kind of thing, you know? So it was a really big day for me.
Yeah.
Balanced, I think.
Yeah. All good. Yeah, definitely a mountaintop experience. Um, It's cool. It's extraordinary to me that you're throwing things out like 5 hour and 40-minute race and
Yeah.
the 1 second finish, and just the story of people grabbing and kicking and like getting very physical in the water. Obviously, in a pool, you've got your own lane, and I've never seen someone come across a lane to pound on somebody before in pool swimming, but it's a different world. I'd love if we could go back and talk about how in that year span of getting disqualified in your first major race to then winning the next year and beating one of the people who beat you before. Just what was that like of kind of the frustration and disappointment of getting beat down physically in the water, the jellyfish, the salt, but then getting disqualified so you didn't even, get to feel like you did what you set out to do. How did you rebound from that?
It was a huge disappointment, and I was super frustrated and probably in a really bad mood for a couple days. But I think one of the things I always live by is like, just because you won doesn't mean you did everything right. Just because you lost doesn't mean you did everything wrong. So I think once I kind of cooled off a little bit, and time tends to put things in perspective. And I think I just focus more on the fact that, dude, you did your first 10K like 2 months ago, and then you just went to the World Championships and swam a 25K, 5 times the farthest race you've ever done in your life, and you almost got a medal. Like, I basically would have been fourth, which is one spot away from a medal. So like that's pretty good, and it really and also the fact that like I struggled to relieve myself and had to fall back and catch up so many times. I was like, dude, imagine if you didn't have to do that. Like you would have been in the hunt. Like you would have been in that breakaway group with Valerio, Trent, and Brendan. Like, so that it was a huge confidence booster for me. Even though it ended up in a disqualification, there was a lot of good stuff in there, and I just chose to focus on that and just just push forward, and immediately I'm pretty sure actually I think I remember saying this, and a coach, one of my coaches, Catherine Vogt, told me that, like, she mentioned this like a few times, like in the years, like the ensuing years, like I remember you like later that night saying like, I think I can win next year. Like I was that confident. And so yeah, I think it's just even when shit happens, just you focus on what went well, and try to continue to play to your strengths going forward, and then like if there's things that that you're a little rusty on, or that you need to improve on, then you focus on those as well, and just trying to improve those. So yeah, it was a tough loss for me, especially like I had some family over there, and went all the way over there. It was my first ever international start, and ended up in a DQ, which is you know how that is. It's never
Probably had been a few years since your last DQ in swimming, I'd imagine.
Yeah, freestyler, that doesn't happen very often.
Right. That's. I mean, I think that's a great point, but I think that's easier said than done. I know for me personally, I've often really tended to dig into the things that I've done wrong, which is kind of funny. I'm generally an optimistic person in life, pretty easygoing, pretty optimistic, but when it comes to things internally that I'm trying really hard at, I just latch on to, all the things I did wrong and the things that I did well, it's hard to dwell on that. And I think that point that you had of finding a way to actually let yourself go to the positives and take them with you and think about how you can improve and build some momentum, I think that's pretty powerful. Yeah, is that something that you feel like you've always been good at, or there are times that you just had to get better at that and learn to adopt that principle with different setbacks in life and in training?
I think in terms of like setbacks in life or in a career, like I definitely, like, honestly, I can't tell you how many times I wanted to quit swimming. Like when I was mostly high school aged. Things changed for me once I went to college and I had like a real team, like a real like brotherhood, and they gave me a sense of like kind of greater good, if you will, or like or camaraderie or brotherhood or whatever, like of which you're a part. But there were definitely some really hard times in high school where I was kind of plateauing. I wasn't really. I think I went maybe a good like year and a half or whatever without like a single best time, which for a young swimmer is like that's hard because you're like I'm growing. Like I should be getting faster without even training. So that's hard, but at the same time, it's like you know the shortest point between or the shortest line between 2 points is not always a straight line. Sometimes it's a little bit of a zigzag line, and life just doesn't unfold in a nice linear fashion like we want it to. And I think that you need to be willing to accept some kind of day to day, week to week, year to year kind of like volatility in your performance, and like spikes in performance are totally normal. Plateaus in performance or declines in performance are totally normal. And like it's almost like thinking of it like a stock, like who here has bought like you bought a stock, it starts to go down, you check it the next day, it's going down again, you check it the next day, it's going down again, you're like, shh, sell it, get rid of it. I'm done. I don't want to lose any more money. And then probably you check it like a month later and it's like way above where you bought it at. It's like that's just how things work. And I think it's hard to accept that sometimes when you want to just always be progressing and advancing and getting better. But maybe it just comes down to patience, like continue to do the right things, and continue to like you for me in those times, like my motivation definitely suffered, but there are a few things that I did to remedy that, and one was reaching out to my mentors. Like mentors I was fortunate to have some really great mentors in my career, and in my life. From when I was really young, it was Robert Terrell because he had all the records on the board, and then it was Paul Rain and Joey, and then once I got to college, it was Sam Wallner and Eric Lynch, and after that it was Fran Crippen and Paul Asmuth, and I've always really valued and those people in my life that have kind of like been through it before and took me under their wing, and I attribute a lot of my success to them. So I think when those tough times happen, like, yeah, reach out to your mentors for encouragement, and then believe and trust in your training and your regimen and your coach or your nutritionist or your dryland coach or whatever. Like there are people around you that are supporting you, that are like in this with you. So I think there's got to be some kind of not come to Jesus, but like it's almost like keeping the faith, with with the people that are kind of in this with you. And also just like daydream and like remind yourself of what you're striving for. Like my way of doing that was, well, yeah, daydreaming, but also like I printed out cut times for all of our different like swim meets. I had like, I think the boys high school state meet. I had the Eastern Speedo sectional meet, and then I had junior nationals, and then senior nationals, and then Olympic trials. Like the cut times all printed out on paper, stapled to my wall next to my bed. And for me, growing up, like in high school, like, and that was kind of like that constant reminder of like, this is important to you. Think about how amazing it would be to like be at that, like to be at Olympic trials, like because that was like my ultimate goal when I was like a young kid. And just I think just like playing out those scenarios in your mind also, whether it's when you're laying in bed or a lot of times I would during training, like during the hardest part of the set where you just like you're like I'm like about to quit, like this is so painful. I'm like actually imagining, visualizing in my mind like doing a race or winning a race or making a team or something like that, you know, and that like that keeps your mojo, I think, like alive. And that those were just like a few of the things that I employed to kind of get myself through those dark times. And it does suck, and but just like know that it's totally normal, and there's no pro athlete or billionaire or whatever that has not like been on the verge of like wanting to give up. So just I think embrace the struggle really is what it comes
Yeah,
down to.
that's right. It's kind of a universal principle of monsters that they will always be something that's too hard and a little bit scary and intimidating. And I think for me growing up, whenever, as a swimmer, certainly looking at people who were my heroes or Olympians, when I was a kid, it's like they must not struggle with any of these things. They're always just so good at everything when I see them. And hearing you unpack all the times that you wanted to quit, all the challenges and frustrations, I think is really helpful, and it's something we need to talk about more often, because in my life there are many times in everything that I've tried that I wanted to quit. That thought came through, whether it was, school or swimming, or, when I started Thunder Beats, my business, or other business pursuits or relationships or anything that's hard. I think we have that thought, I want to quit. It would be so much easier if I just walked away. And I think
Yeah.
not beating ourselves up or punishing ourselves for having that thought, but just accepting to do anything worth doing, you have to get to the point where it's too hard for you. You're not going to grow,
Yep.
and you have to
Yep.
face that and just kind of live with it and grind through it for a while. Yeah, I liked what you said too about the mentors in your life and the other people, and how for me that's been kind of personal, where the darkest times of my life I was the most isolated for sure, and trying to do difficult things and trying to face a monster alone is just, that is what feels impossible. It's too much.
Yep.
And whether it's training with other people just to push you that extra little bit, or other people to give you that boost, whether it's emotionally or just telling you things that you don't know on your own, I think that camaraderie and that need for other human beings is very powerful, and that I think is universal to every situation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Let's talk a little bit about the World Cup. You'd mentioned Fran as one of your mentors, and I know it's
Yeah.
pretty impactful in your life, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that experience and relationship.
So what do you mean by the World Cup? Like the actual the circuit, or like the specific one that he died at, or
Yeah, let's talk about that race, the UAE, and that experience.
so for those who don't know, which is probably most listeners, the professional marathon swimming circuit it is kind of centered around two different tours, if you will. One of them is strictly a 10K race circuit called the FINA World Cup, and the other one is the longer races, like 15 all the way up to like 88K. Yes, 88K.
It's a lot of K.
That one is actually down like down a river. So it only takes about 9 or 10 hours, but that's called the Grand Prix. So anyway, I didn't really do many Grand Prix races. I did a few of them, like, but the more kind of competitive, like Olympic focused cohort of open water marathon swimmers went to these World Cup races, right? And basically, it's kind of like Formula One or like the USA Swimming Grand Prix, where you kind of go to each event, you accumulate points as you go through, and then if you have enough points at the end of the circuit, you're you can earn some money and you can say I won such and such, whatever. So this was the final stop in the 2010 FINA World Cup. So it was a 10K race, and it was it was supposed to be in Abu Dhabi or Dubai or something in the United Arab Emirates, but last minute got moved to a different location in a city called Fujairah because something was wrong with the original venue. And it was it was so hot there. It was like extremely hot. And normally, like when the wind blows, it makes you feel cooler. In this case, it like was hotter. It's like a blow dryer like on your face. And we didn't really think much of it or anything like that. But the water was also very warm. It was like 88 degrees, which if you even try to swim like a 200 free in an 88-degree pool, you're like pretty uncomfortable. And so like high heat really impairs your ability to like put out energy. It just makes you lethargic and it just like makes you feel terrible. But anyway, I had actually had my appendix removed about a week before, and me being like a stubborn, like think I'm tough guy kind of whatever. I was like, I'm just gonna go anyway, and I can pull it off and whatever. Yeah, and I figured there actually was a Grand Prix event the following week. So I was like, worst case, if I'm not healed up by the time the 10K rolls around, I'll just wait a week and chill, and I'll do the 15K Grand Prix event in the same location. That didn't end up happening because basically during the 10K event, Fran had asked me. So Fran, maybe I should just tell you a little bit more about Fran first. But so was like one of the names in swimming. It also probably helped that he was a Crippen, and there were like 3 other Crippens that were also very talented swimmers, including his older sister Maddie, who's a little bit more your era, who was an Olympian in 2000, I think. Yes, 2000. And they're all from the Philadelphia area and just like really all around great people. And I actually met Fran when I was a senior in high school on my recruiting trip to the University of Virginia, and he let me sleep in his bed. But I didn't really come back around to knowing him until that 2009 World Championships in Rome that I told the story about, getting disqualified in the 25K. So we were roommates at that championships, and we just like hit it off, and like he really took me under his wing, and he was kind of like the older guy. You know what it's like being the freshman. You think the older guys on the team are just like the coolest dudes in the world, and you just want to do anything you can to like impress them or make them laugh or whatever. So it was kind of like that. It was very much like a senior freshman kind of like captain freshman like relationship. But he just was he was a fierce competitor. He was a loyal teammate, and he had a lot of success both in the pool and open water, mostly in the pool, as a matter of fact, for a long time. Like he was kind of one of those phenoms. It was really good at a really young age. So from like, probably for the last 10 years of his life, he had been on the national team and had been going to these things and knew what it was like to be a professional swimmer, and really just I felt so much more comfortable being on that team in Rome, having him kind of like, I just felt like he was by my side, partially because he was literally by my side as a roommate, and like a lot of I I realized a lot of European hotel rooms are like very small and like everything's kind of pushed together and whatever. So anyway, he just he was like the best person for me to be with on my first trip, and I learned a lot from him. And we became really good friends over the years. And honestly, it's hard to be friends with your competitors. Like it's really hard. And like I'm friends with guys. There are some guys that I was on the national team with that I'm just not friends with. There's some that I'm friends with now, but wasn't really back then. Because it's hard. It's hard to like love them and want to be their friend and help them out, but at the same time, like the next day, you wake up in the morning, you want to rip their hair out, like it's a really hard thing to balance. But I think for whatever reason, the friendship that Fran and I had kind of transcended that. It was just a little bit bigger than that, and he was just, not to say he didn't have plenty of enemies in the sport, because he was like a pretty outspoken guy. He's a Philly guy. Like, he was not a reserved individual by any means. So like, I'm sure some people felt quite differently, but like it is core. He was like just a really good human being. Anyway, so we developed this really strong friendship, like despite the fact that we had to compete against each other. The following year, actually, just quick anecdote, like at our Pan Pacs, which is pretty much the biggest 10K, which is the biggest event of the year. It was after that 2000, even though 2010 was the World Championships, the Pan Pacs 10K race was the one where you have to qualify for your funding as far as USA Swimming is concerned, like so you can get your stipend and stay on the national team. Like that's what mattered. It wasn't the World Championships, because it was just an open water World Championships. It wasn't a whole swimming World Championships, which is odd years every other year. Whereas up until that 2010, open water had its own World Championships. Anyway, I got really sick. I got food poisoning like a day before that 10K at Pan Pacs. So I was basically like, I'm screwed. I'm not making any money next year. Like I'm gonna have to like move back home with my parents and eat ramen or whatever. But in the middle of that race, I was like struggling. I was falling really far behind, and I was like basically probably getting ready to just call it a day and just swim into the shore. And I look up and I'm like, oh, I'm catching them. I'm catching people. This is awesome. And then I looked up a couple strokes later. I'm like, holy shit, like I've caught up a lot. Like I'm so close now. And then I realized it's actually Frank Crippen swimming the opposite direction towards me to make sure that I'm okay. In the middle of arguably the most important race of the year. And he's doing that, which is like goes against like everything our competitive spirit is tells us to do, right? It's like screw everyone else. Like I'm out here for myself. I'm trying to get my meal. I'm out here for me. So that was I think just that gesture was symbolic of like just the type of guy that he was. Anyway, so fast forward to later that year, actually in 2010 in the fall, I decide I can't swim because I have basically an open incision in my stomach. And I was like, I'll just be there to support and whatever. And Fran asked me to film the finish. So by the time the finish rolls around, and it's like a miserable day. It's so hot, not a cloud in the sky. I film, and he was up there in the standings, like I mentioned the points before. So he basically had to get at least like not even that high, like at least eighth place in this race, and he would be in the top 3 for points, which means you get money and you get all your trips paid for the following season and all that stuff. So he was going to get top 8, like mark his words. Like there would be nothing that would stand in the way of him getting top like 8th place, which isn't even like for him, like it isn't even like that fantastic of a result. So after the first 10, 20 people came through, I'm like, something is not right here. So I start asking around. I was like, has anybody seen Fred? Like, did he get out? Maybe he had a bad race. Like I would not put it past him to be like halfway through the race and he's not feeling good. He got dropped by the pack and he's like, screw this, I'm going home. And he just like gets out and walks to the hotel and doesn't tell anybody, right? Like that's something he would do. So I kind of like, he's probably really pissed off right now, but, like, let's just try to find where he is. And as time goes on, I just start getting a little more and more worried. And like, there are a few athletes coming out that are getting pulled straight into the ambulance and they're thrown up and it's like it's really bad. Like people are in really bad shape. There were a lot of people that got out of the race too because it was so hot. And after about I don't remember how long, maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, I'm starting to try to find anyone who is like has anything to do with organizing this event, which is like pretty bare bones to be honest. Like some of these World Cups are very well produced events. They roll out the red carpet. They've got all the security measures in place. They've got nice branding everywhere. They got tents for the athletes. They've got a big podium. They might have a nice car parked out with like some ads for Toyota or whatever it is. Like it's a very nice looking event. Whereas some of them, like this one, is just like this. It's like someone just threw it in their backyard with like no planning whatsoever, and it's like there's no lifeguards. I can't find an official anywhere. It's like this is like totally not up to par for what a World Cup, especially the last one of the year, should be. And I know they moved venues at the last minute, but still, like, anyway. So I had a hard time just tracking someone down to get them to take me seriously. That like, hey, like we have a problem here. Like someone is missing that should have finished about half an hour ago or an hour ago. Like this is not a this is like this is an actual problem. So I got someone finally to take me out on a jet ski, and I'm like, let's go drive around the course. And I'm on the back. And actually, at one point, I saw someone swimming really slow into the finish. Who I was like, oh, thank God, like there he is. He's swimming really slow, and like the guy looked exactly like Fran. He's a Czech swimmer. Same goggles, same haircut, same like facial. So I was super relieved for a second, and then we got out there, and I was just like, oh shit, that's not him. That's not him. We got to keep looking. But there was nothing to look for, so it actually got to the point where now other swimmers are like concerned, right? Because one, they experienced that, which is horrible. 4 or 5 other athletes are in an ambulance or on their way to the hospital, and now we can't find Fran. So, and like also knowing Fran, he pushes himself like harder than like almost anybody or maybe anybody that I've ever known. Like he pushes it to the edge, So I'm kind of nervous that he's on the bottom of the ocean somewhere. And like in a way I kind of knew it, but like I didn't want to believe it. But at the same time, I'm literally diving down to like look for his body, and I'm like, but I still can't believe that he's down there. So like I'm like, why am I doing this then if he's not down there? I did, yeah. Eventually, that's what I resorted to because like we drove around the course a bunch of times. I was like, well, I mean, I don't see him anywhere unless he left the bay and is out in the ocean somewhere. Like, so it resorted to that, and then we got a small group of swimmers that we all just started combing the bottom of the ocean looking for him. And ultimately, after about, and also not to mention physically exhausting, right? Like you're holding your breath for 30 seconds at a time at the bottom. You're trying to come up and get air, and like you're also trying to reconcile your own physical pain with like your potential, like trying to find your potentially dead friend's body, and you're like, but wait 2 more seconds, like I need to catch my breath a little bit more. It's like wait. So anyway, that was a really weird and really terrible experience that I hope I never have to go through again. But at one point, there was some commotion in the area. There were jet skis flying everywhere and boats and all that stuff, and I was like, something's happening. And I think I saw people kind of moving in one direction on the shore, so I swam in, and that's where basically we saw the Coast Guard boat that had found him, just kind of slowly moving into the marina there, and yeah, and at that point I kind of knew that what had happened. So really, really, really bad day, really sad day. But I even though we only knew each other for a short time, it was really a year and a half. I feel like I knew him for 10 years, and I feel like I got 10 years worth of mentorship from him, and it was really those were like the best years of my life, honestly. It was just we were just living the dream, totally living the dream. And in the I ultimately made the Olympic team the following summer, but it was just really it was a bittersweet moment for me because like we had kind of talked. We didn't really we maybe touched on it briefly or hinted at it. We never really said, bro, we should totally like make the team together kind of thing. But like I think we both kind of knew that like there's only two spots, and if that, right? Because it's not like a pool event where every country's guaranteed two, because they only have 25 people in the race. So you can get up to two. You can get 0, 1, or 2. And we kind of I think both wanted for both of us to go. Like that was like we almost cared as much about each other making it as we did about ourselves. So when I made it, it's just like I was relieved. I was felt proud, but like it was also just kind of empty feeling because I was like, fuck, this is not how I wanted this to go. Yeah, it's not how I pictured this happening. So
Do you feel like your perspective on the sport or your approach changed a little bit after that?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the ironic thing is that so Fran was very involved with some of the governance of our sport. So, meaning he would go to the USA Swimming Convention, he would be on committees, and he was just involved with the governance of the sport. And one of the things that he really cared about was safety, was athlete safety. And the irony of him being the one that ultimately succumbed to complete and total lack of common sense safety measures at a high profile, what should be very well produced event, still kind of stuns me to this day. But after that, after he died in Abu Dhabi, I felt like I kind of had to carry that torch a little bit, and I think a lot of us felt that way that were on the national team. So I started going to convention. I was on the open water steering committee and trying to implement. I was on the open water development committee that basically was in charge of creating a new open water event sanction application for events within the United States to basically try to hold them to higher standards for safety, and mostly in terms of supervision, like number of eyes on athletes kind of thing. And in a way, it felt a little empty because it was just like I'm a day late and $1 short here. But at the same time, it was important to me, and I felt like, since Fran's not here anymore to do this on our behalf, then I should probably step in and help. I honestly was very, well, understandably, was like very angry also as well in terms of, or in addition to just being full of like dealing with grief and all that. So I think that I probably didn't express my anger in the most productive way possible sometimes. And although that may be understandable, I think I probably could have done a little better job with that, being a little more diplomatic, especially given the type of organization that USA Swimming is, which is a very, kind of cut, white coat kind of prim and proper. It's a national governing body for a very white sport. Let's be honest. And they like. Well, anyway, I did the best I could. I probably got a little emotional at times, and maybe was a little too direct with people or about my thoughts or whatever. But I hope that I helped move that conversation forward a little bit. I think that I did. Probably could have been better, but still, I think that, I did what I could. And it, for the first time, I really became aware of like the politics and like behind the sport and how kind of dirty that is. And I think a lot of people have become more aware of that recently with like the Icarus documentary and everything that went on in Sochi and like all these doping scandals and all that. Like there's a really dirty world, like in like the sporting world is like pretty dirty in some parts. So yeah, it did change the way I saw things, especially, and one thing that like really fired me up was, so I won the 25K at the World Championships in 2010. Fran died that was in July. Fran died in October of 2010. And for the first time, and honestly, something I never even thought about, having a maximum temperature rule. We always had a minimum temperature rule, like, oh, hypothermia, that's really bad, really scary, and very real, right? Like everyone understands that. But we never really thought about water being too hot. So, and we didn't have a rule about that. So eventually, after Fran passed, I think they implemented a rule basically saying 31 degrees Celsius, which is like 81 and 87 and change, close to 88 degrees Fahrenheit, is the maximum. You can't have a race if that's like, you have to test the water and, like an hour, like before the race. And if it's outside that, then you have to postpone it or whatever. And they, at the 25K World Championships in Shanghai in 2011, they just like blatantly disregarded that. And I had just qualified for the Olympic team, got fourth in the 10K. I was a defending 25K world champion. I was really excited to defend my title, but I was like, the water is like 33 degrees Celsius. I saw the thermometer. Like I have my own. Like if you plunge the thing 10 feet down underwater, like that doesn't count. Like no one is down there. So like they very clearly, there's political pressure. There's all kind of pressures to just like let the show must go on, right? So, so I withdrew. I said, I am not swimming this race. Like this is wrong. This is against your own rules. And let's not forget that someone died less than a year ago because of exactly what you're doing right now. So I became like pretty disillusioned with FINA and not really USA Swimming. At least on this issue, I had some issues with USA Swimming, but like they were relatively minor and like whatever. But yeah, it did kind of taint the sport a little bit for me, to be honest. But I dealt with that by just trying to, keep Fran's legacy and memory alive and do what I could to promote, safety in the sport, whether that's, stuff I did with USA Swimming or Fran's, the Crippen family created a foundation called the Fran Crippen Elevation Foundation that promotes, swimming athlete safety and also supports, provides a stipend for some elite athletes and also a scholarship to Germantown Academy for high school kids, which is where all the Crippens went. It's a big part of their life and their family. So that's just kind of how I dealt with it. So
Yeah. Now, you got some other athletes also to withdraw from the race. Is that correct? Or were you the only one?
and there were a few, yes. Lindsay Heister, who was from the Netherlands, she won in 2010. So both of the defending champions bagged the race, saying this is not okay. And the thing was, it didn't really get that bad until like the day before. Like I wish I had a little more time to like organize and say, actually what I really wanted to do was have everyone go out to the starting line. And when they shoot the gun off, everyone just turns around and walks back to their team room or to their tent or whatever. That would be like the ultimate screw you. Like this is like show of kind of like this is wrong. But the thing is, there's a lot on the line at events like this. And every time someone like me or Thomas Lurtz or whoever drops out, there's that much more incentive for people that maybe wouldn't otherwise have had a chance to medal to stay in the race because they're like, well, now I have my shot because
Yeah.
Alex Meyer's not in there, Brian Reichman's not swimming, Chad Ho's not in there. My time to try to come home with something shiny, you know. So I think that was kind of what you're up against, and that's why. But like honestly, I don't really fault them for that because everyone trained really hard to be here to have this opportunity, right? It shouldn't be. And I remember at one point I went up to one of the FINA medical director who I knew personally, and I said, "This is like you need to stop this race right now. Like this is bullshit. This is wrong. You know it's wrong." And blah blah blah. Talked his ear off, and he was like, "Well, the swimmers are the ones that want to keep going, or like the swimmers were the ones that wanted to do it, or and the coaches were supporting it." I was like, "Of course they were. Why wouldn't they? They came all the way to China for this. They trained for the last 2 years for this. You think they're just going to willingly say, I don't know if it's right? No, they're gonna go after what they've been working so hard for. It's not their job to make those calls. It's your job, and you're failing at your job. So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a interesting parallel, kind of the ugly side of what a lot of people have experienced, where people become less valuable than a brand or a name or a performance or a show. And I think when we sacrifice just the kind of the common decency to care about people and value people, and we just want the
Yep.
show to go on, or you don't want to rock the boat, and that's tough. Yeah, yeah. Is there anything about Fran that you feel like you've taken with you that you learned from him through the time with camaraderie, as him as your mentor, or just getting to train or race with him? Something that you take with you now.
Um, uh, yes, a lot of things. I mean, like, kind of what I mentioned is, just I think he made me like a little more, or at least made me more comfortable with like expressing like my competitiveness and like how kind of fierce I was, whether it be in training or in a race or just out of the water. And so I appreciated that. I think I've tried to, step into his shoes somewhat in terms of like I was talking about with, some of these USA Swimming kind of committees and this governance stuff that just you need good quality athlete representation, and pretty much every major decision that affects how the sport is like administered. So I've tried to step in there. Collecting mugs. I now have a mug problem because of him. Yeah, everywhere he went, one of his he liked to collect the Starbucks mugs because like I don't like Starbucks coffee personally. It's a little too dark for me, but he did, and one of his favorite lines was always it was like you can go anywhere in the world and you can always find a Starbucks. You could probably swap that for McDonald's or whatever else, but he wanted to collect all of the because I guess they have like a mug that has like the name of the city or whatever that you're in. So it's kind of like you collect. I got my Hong Kong, Starbucks mug and my Shanghai mug, and I got my Rome Starbucks mug or whatever. But I tend to go for like a little more authentic pieces, a little more unique mugs. But I definitely have a couple boxes of those that I don't really know what to do with. But yeah, and also just honestly, it's his passing has strengthened the bond between so many of us, like teammates, coaches, national team, like USA Swimming administrators, like the Crippen family, Dick Schoberg. I ended up training at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville under Tyler Fenwick, who grew up with Fran in Philly, and I knew because of Fran, and I just happened to be in Knoxville because I was visiting my cousin who lived there, and at the time, Tim Murphy had actually already moved on to Penn State. So I was kind of looking for a place and felt like, I was looking at going to NCAP or to USC or to Penn State or to stay in Boston. Nothing was, just felt like kind of at the end of my rope, and I didn't really, couldn't quite find a home. And it was just like this, oh no, duh, I need to go to Knoxville. That's where I need to go. And like part of that was my connection to Tyler through Fran. And I wouldn't have, I doubt that my life would have, or my career, my life would have gone that direction if like that hadn't happened. So it's like obviously a tragedy, and we all want Fran to like still be here. And, I really looked forward to sharing a lot of the rest of our, a lot of time together for, and memories and weddings and kids and whatnot, like as we're, after we're done with our sport. But he, like, the tragedy definitely brought like our little insular swimming community together like a lot more. So, I guess that's kind of one gift that he's given us.
Yeah, it's interesting how tragedy and suffering and just struggle really forges a bond with other people and can bring a closeness that nothing else can.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about London, your Olympic experience, and I know it's kind of bittersweet and there were some ups and downs, but I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and takeaways from that.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned I qualified for the games. Actually, like some people actually might know. So swimming is one of those sports where no one really cares about it, except for like 2 weeks every 4 years. But like, and I think some kind of like layperson swimming fans might even know that there's like a trials that happens a few months before, and basically if you get top 2 in your event, you go to the Olympics. That's not really the case for open water, as I kind of alluded to before, because the race itself is just limited to 25 people. Like if you had every country throw in 2 human beings, you'd have like a huge pack that might not even fit in the lake that you're trying to hold the competition at. So I qualified by virtue of a top 10 finish in 2011 in Shanghai, where I got 4th place. I got a lot of 4ths in my career, actually. Getting 4th sucks, man. I'd rather get 5th. One spot off the podium. That's never fun. But anyway, I qualified there. So it was about a year and change ahead of the games. So I had like a whole year plus a month to prepare, which was a good thing. There's some advantages there, but there's also something to be said for the momentum of carrying, just having made the team into the games, which is what happens for basically everyone else, because trials are usually in early July, and then the games begin end of July, early August. So it's kind of like a double taper, and you're getting that like second taper kind of thing going on. So anyway, I, in many ways have like always felt like kind of like on the border between like an insider outsider. I've kind of got like 1 foot in the group and kind of 1 foot outside the group. Like I've got a lot of groups I kind of associate with, but I'm not like a hardcore insider part of like any group. I would say our little open water crew was like, that was different. Like we were very, very tight knit. But so like I was on a lot of these trips with national team like pool swimmers, like, the big names that everyone knows, and like all the other names that people like probably hear about, like, every 4 years kind of thing. And, I was friends with a lot of them, or friendly with them, but I never really felt like I'm part of the crew, because like it was just different. I'm swimming a 2-hour race. That's more than 6 times longer than anyone else is doing here. And except for 4 people, or except for 2 people, the 2 guys doing the 1500, it's like it's like 8 times longer than, or sorry, 24 times longer than anything anyone else is doing, right? So I was always just kind of like on a different training schedule, and I needed to like train in open water. Like at least that was my style. There were some some open water swimmers that only trained in the pool, which that just didn't really work for me. So not only did I I was just kind of separate, but also I had this year period where it got especially hard once like everyone else was kind of leading up to the trials and getting excited, and I'm just like, dude, can we just do this thing already? And like get like by the time the Olympics rolled around, I was like almost more ready to be done with it than I was excited about doing it, which is like a really bad mental place to come from. But what kind of I think exacerbated that was that I fell off my bike in February before the games and I broke my collarbone. So I was out of the water for like 6 weeks. And not many people say this, but like I wasn't in great shape for the Olympics. So and you know, it just sucked because I felt like I was really on a roll, and you know, from like winning that 25K in 2010, and even you know, kind of carrying friends' memory with me, I felt like I felt really powerful. I felt like, man, I'm gonna kick everyone's ass. Like I know it. It's like you just know it. It's like if you see like your little 5-year-old cousin, you're like, I could kick his ass. It was like I was that confident that I was gonna kick everyone's ass. It was like, of course I'm gonna kick your ass. It's like you're 5, right? Like of course I'm gonna kick your ass. So it was like that, and it's just like I was very, very up until the collarbone thing, I was like feeling like this is gonna go really well for me. And then it just didn't. I got 10th place, which is like, you know, hey, 10th place is really good. It's like, but yeah, but we don't think like that. Like it's a it's a it's relative, you know. It's like relative to your expectations. Like, yeah, 10th place in the Olympics would be good for you. You can barely get across the pool. Of course, you would be satisfied with that, but I'm not. That was a pretty tough experience for me, especially because like I felt some weight on my shoulders. Like, you know, I wanted to do Fran proud. I wanted to do better than Mark had done in 2008. So 2008, just so you know, like was the first time the 10K was contested in the Olympic Games. It was kind of a new event. And I forget what, I think he got 8th. So I was like, I just want to like keep the Team USA like getting better and better each time, you know, like, so, you know, but also like I wanted a medal. I wanted a medal. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself because of those things and the Fran thing, and then also like Haley Anderson, who's like she's a really talented open water 10K 5 and 10K swimmer. She's done a couple 25s, but she got silver the day before my race. So now I felt like even more pressure, like not to mention the fact that like our pool team like just crushes everybody, right? Like we crush the medal count in swimming. And I always like to say that the greatest team in the history of sport. We win every year. We've won every year for like the last like few decades, right? So there was like kind of that pressure as well. And yeah, and I also had like there's a little episode where some of my coaches were this was after the suit era. Like most of your listeners probably won't know, but like there was a period in 2008 2009 where suit technology, they're going through the same thing in running right now with a lot of these shoes with a special sole that makes you run like a lot faster. These suit companies were making suits that just made you swim a lot faster. And it only lasted for a short period of time after like every world record had been smashed, and they're like, okay, this is out of control. Like we need to ban these or at least limit the type of technology that you can use. But in open water, you could still wear a full body at that point. You can't wear certain material. Like you can't have like the Jacobs or the Blue 70 type like polyurethane stuff that's really buoyant. But you can have a textile zipperless full body suit. Personally, I didn't like them. I didn't like having stuff over my shoulders. And I was really adamant about that. And I pretty sure I told my coaches, I was like, guys, I'm wearing a leg suit. End of story. I don't want to hear anything about it ever again. Okay. Not up for debate. But I don't even know. I don't know how it came around, but it basically the morning of the race, I like suited up in my leg suit and got some pressure from some people. And I was like, fine, screw it. I'll put a full body on. And I put it on. And I barely ever race in these things either. And like the second, I also was like super, like in the ready room, I was like super emotional. Like I was like, most people are fired up in the ready room. I was crying. And I had a picture of Fran that I carried with me everywhere. I actually made a very cool little album. Like everywhere I went after he passed away, I took a picture of him like somewhere, something like a traveling gnome kind of thing. Some of them are pretty funny too. It was a fun little project. But I had that with me. You know, I was just like, man, I was a wreck. And when I dove into the water, like my first thought was like, shit, I'm wearing the wrong suit. Like I'm wearing the wrong suit. Why did I do that? I should have stuck with my intuition. I should have stuck with my gut, with my what I know, what I've raced in before. I screwed up, and I let other people convince me to make this decision that was wrong. And that was just like maybe the ice, like the camel that kind of broke the back, its back there, because I just from then on for like most of that race, I was just battling some really really negative thoughts, and like most of the time, I feel like I'm able to overcome them, and you know, kind of recognize that that's not you talking, okay? That's your body's natural reaction to physical stress, okay? Think about the evolutionary pressures that have created this neural circuitry over millennia, right? Like this is totally normal. There's nothing wrong with this, but normally I can kind of take that approach and talk myself down and kind of observe my thoughts rather than being immersed by them or controlled by them, and kind of shoo the flight response away and kind of focus on the fight response kind of thing. But that was just not one of those days. I think it was just a compilation of a year of loneliness. And like, along with that, like when everyone was like I missed out on training camps and everything. I was like at the Colorado Springs Olympic Training Center at altitude for 5 weeks with no other athletes and like 4 or 5 coaches with me, like telling me what to do. And I'm just like, this is fucking miserable. Anyway, so like, yeah, year of loneliness, like wanting Fran to be there, feeling some pressure to kind of carry his legacy and represent him, and you know, Haley winning a medal, and my collarbone having been broken less than 6 months prior, and not being in great shape, and wearing the wrong suit, and it was just like, I think I was done before I even started. Honestly, could I, if I had the absolute best mindset, could I have won that race? I probably still don't even think so, which is like makes me feel a little bit better, because physically I only had really like 4 months of real training, you know, for this. So even if mindset wasn't an issue, like I don't think I would have gotten a medal. But who knows? Maybe I would have. But anyway, it wasn't my day. You know, it was just one of those that you throw that one in the W column and you just kind of move on.
Yeah, what went through your mind when you were there and that happened, and then you went home after the Olympics and you had achieved this pinnacle that you dreamed about most of your life and many other people do, and then it felt like such a letdown, or you didn't really get to do what you wanted. Did you think about walking away at
Yeah.
that point, or how did you navigate that disappointment, and what did that do to you internally?
No, I did not think about walking away at all. And like the thing that I do think that I was pretty good at is like, so long term periods of like a plateau, like we talked about before, or you know, not feeling like into your sport, or you're not improving or whatever, like these like more systemic kind of things. That's really hard. But like, and I struggle with that. But singular moment in time, kind of like I lost this race or I did perform poorly on this workout or this set or whatever, like that that fired me up like more than anything. Like I like my little mantra, like my kind of my thing was always just like I refuse to be discouraged by this. Like that really is like what I consider to be like the champion mindset, because being a champion, or like having a champion mindset has nothing to do with actually winning anything. It's about how you approach about how you approach the next thing, kind of. And when I lost a race, especially one that I felt like I should have won, that pissed me off more than anything. And it also that translated directly into, I'm not taking tomorrow off. Like I'm gonna go train or something like that. You know, like that. I was pretty good at turning that into fuel for the fire. So after that, I was like, man, I really missed my opportunity to like prove my worth to the world. Um, and I actually I I just I just channeled that directly back into my training, and I think 2013 actually was a good, at least 2013 nationals was a good year for me. And there's actually a picture out there somewhere of me winning nationals and doing one. I was never really like a hot dogger celebrator, kind of like, this kind of guy. But after I won that race, it all came out. It was almost like all the frustration in my life. And I had like a lot of really terrible personal stuff going on in my life that was also like really, really frustrating and really tormented me. And it left me like, it was just a really bad situation. And so I had like a lot of pent up, just like rage. I think I was just like operating on pure rage at that point. And that's okay. Like whatever. And some people like to listen to Rage Against the Machine before they compete. Some people like to listen to classical music. Some people want silence. Some people want a noisy room of people talking. It's like whatever fires you up, and everyone's an individual, and that's totally fine. And it may change from day to day or year to year as well, and that's totally normal too. So, but yeah, like discrete kind of singular setbacks like that, I was always pretty good at just
Yeah, a little
turning
leverage
that
of
into
motivation for going forward.
to fuel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've been wanting to ask you,
Yeah. Yeah.
based on all these pretty intense ups and downs in and out of the pool, in and out of the ocean or lake, as it were, the jellyfish, hots and colds, and tragedy and loss. It sounds like there are some low times and some difficult things, and I'm curious how you feel like on this side of it you've grown through those challenges, through those monsters that you faced, and then what did you learn about just taking care of yourself and becoming healthy and becoming a better person?
Yeah. Well, to the first point, I think that when you are kind of doing your thing as an athlete, like your world is the world, is the entire world, right? And you don't really realize that there are like so many other things out there, so many other people doing totally different things and having completely different types of success and finding meaning and purpose and like totally different stuff, right? So like I got to the point where I felt like because swimming was my thing and my passion, and I was kind of on top of swimming world. I wasn't even on top of the swimming world. I was on top of the open water swimming world, which is like a subset of swimming, which is a infinitesimally small subset of like the world, right? Like it still is everything to you. I think once you kind of move on, once you move on from it, well, and therefore your successes are extreme validation, and your failures mean like they feel like you feel like you're worthless or you're no good, right? Like because you're looking at it through the lens of what you are striving for and what your tiny little window. And when you move on from it, I think you realize that what you felt like, I felt like making this team will define me for the rest of my life. Winning this event will define who I am. It really doesn't. Like it in a way you kind of have to have that mentality to get to that level. Like it has to be like I need to achieve this or I will die. And that's how I felt. But like once you move on from it, and it takes a little bit of time, but like it like I said before, like time puts everything into perspective. And what I've come to value more about my career is not what I like the races I won or that I was on an Olympic team or I can tell stories or whatnot, but it's really having experienced those and learned lessons from those ups and downs and the tragedies and just the incredible people that I've encountered and become lifelong friends with that has really created just a very a very textured fabric of my life, and without if I just like steadily progressed and everything was kind of linear and things went according to plan all the time and even still say reached like my if I got from here to here by a straight line, it would be not nearly as interesting or valuable if I got from here to here by doing this, like I think it's a much more rich life, and I'm supremely thankful for the opportunity to have experienced that. And what was the second part? Like what is
so
it?
How
What have
have
I
you
learned
learned to
about?
become
Yeah,
healthier,
say that again.
and take care of yourself and to grow through these experiences? Yeah, just to jump in while you think about that, I asked that
Yeah,
question because, in my experience, I've just
yeah,
noticed that the more challenging points in my life where I pushed myself the hardest, things started to slide. And for me, it was my emotional and mental health, and I just thought that if I
hmm
pushed harder and tried harder and didn't give up, that it'd be okay.
hmm
And I think there's value in the strength of will and continuing, but a lot of my relationships suffered, my mental and physical health suffered, and I think there's something about pushing yourself really hard for a singular purpose that we can easily damage other parts of our life. And I'm curious if you've learned ways to become healthier as you've progressed, and certainly on this side of your career now, if you think you've become healthier.
hmm I honestly, I one thing that I do wish I had taken a little more time to do, or had a little more perspective to do during that time was like make a little bit better use of that time between practices or after practice before bed, and like do some like take a class or study for the GRE or the GMAT, or learn how to code software, or like something. Like I felt like, because now I'm feeling, I've honestly been had probably a harder time staying healthy in those ways that you describe post swimming, because I feel very unmoored, so um, I been kind of, struggling to find my groove again, like I kind of felt like had built a nice foundation, and I was good at something, and I had a craft, and I was honing my craft every day. And now I'm kind of just like, oh, go to work and like my job, but go home, and actually work is at home, so there's no difference now. And it's kind of just like I'm not thriving. Like I used to feel like I was thriving, like I was working for something, and now I'm just kind of like existing. It's just like not really moving up or down or sideways anyway. So like I actually say I'm having a harder time with that now. Um, so I might have to get back to you on an answer for that one, but I do think that I wish that I had the perspective as an athlete to prepare myself a little bit more for life after your sport, because when you're in it, your sport is everything, and basically you don't are not willing to really consider plan Bs or what happens next, or what, because you're just so singularly focused on what's right in front of you. And I just wish I had a little more, a little like more open mind, or just a little like broader, like higher level perspective on my life and my purpose, and especially relating to kind of, swimming is going to end at some point, and what are you going to
Yeah, I think
do
that's a
after that?
really honest answer. I know
So,
for me that probably the most depressed I've ever been was in the transition phase of after, this business Thunder Beast that I'd put everything I had into it, all my money, all my time, worked very, very hard. And recently, like, my business is still alive and I'm still able to keep my brand going. But after lawsuit and then after COVID, I lost so many accounts and so many things went downhill. I had to start doing something else, at least
mm-hmm,
as my full-time focus. And that was really hard. It's hard to put everything you have into something for a long time and let it define you. And then to find something else is really difficult. So I appreciate you saying that and sharing that. And I think that's really,
yeah,
yeah, it's a difficult
but,
battle.
uh,
Something I've tried to
yeah,
tell myself, often unsuccessfully, is just a reminder that if you're not good enough without something, then once you have it, you won't be good enough with it. If you need something so badly to validate yourself and define you, then if you do achieve that, it's not going to be what you need it to be or want it to be. And so I think that is a difficult thing to work on when we don't have that other big shiny, maybe even golden thing in our life that we want to be
mm-hmm,
there. How do we become satisfied, and how do we become
mm-hmm,
healthy and okay with who we are, and still learn to push ourselves? And to me, that's kind of a double-edged sword of wanting to be the best at something, wanting to be a champion and pushing yourself really, really hard. Is you have all that intensity and that focus and that drive, but you can very easily let it consume your life, and it can be unhealthy. And it's hard. It's hard to have that balance.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, because I just that resonates a lot with like my life as it is now. And like maybe it's not the best time, just and like with everything going on, to really make an accurate assessment. But at the same time, yes, I I think I've kind of admitted to myself that like at least part of it was like feeling like I needed like some kind of validation, um, and that validation allowed me to like be very intense in one aspect of my life, and like very relaxed and like laid back in another aspect, because I knew I had this other thing that I was like a badass at, so I could lay back and just kind of enjoy life a little bit more. And now that I don't really have, I don't really have like an avenue or an outlet for my like ambition, or I guess I don't really know what my ambition is, honestly. And it's hard for me to get motivated and energized around something that doesn't really have anything to do with me. I like the company that I work for, and I think that they have a really good mission and a great product and a great service, and it's not mine. So I'm trying to figure out in my own mind, like, do I need, it's like, it used to be like my passion and my livelihood and my identity were all kind of raveled together in one thing. And am I willing to separate those things? And I don't know the answer to that yet. So I'm trying to figure that out. I think that's a really, I'm gonna be thinking about that tonight as I'm trying to go to bed, about, if you're not good enough, if you're not good enough without it, you're not good enough with it either. Um, but yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I just I still I'm just the type of person that at the end of every day I need to feel like I've accomplished something, like I've created something, or I've learned something, or I've built something, or I just I had a great day skiing today and I got a little better skiing. You know, like that, like I need to feel like I'm always kind of moving the needle forward a little bit. And like, I don't even know if that's necessarily the, it needs to be that way, you know? Maybe, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I'm just figuring this out kind of as on the fly here, like as I go. So I've got a lot to figure out on my end as well, in terms of like, I think we're in a similar situation. We're kind of transitioning from one thing that was our life and was our passion and also our livelihood, and invested a lot of time and effort into, and then you kind of get your feet cut out from under you, and you're just like, well, what the hell do I do now? You know, like, am I ever going to find something that I'm as passionate about and as motivated to be good at as that? Or, and if not, does that even matter? Like, do I even need to? Like, there are plenty of people that just go out and they go to work every day and they come home at 5 o'clock and they're totally content, you know, just like being with their family and having hobbies and doing all that stuff. Like, maybe that was just one phase of our lives, and it's, we're not going to find something that we're that intensely passionate about, or maybe we will, and maybe if we don't, then maybe that's okay, or maybe it's not. I don't know. You can tell I'm just like I'm kind of a scatterbrained like mess when it comes to this stuff, because I'm like, every day this is what I think about every day. This is what I think about when I'm like lying in bed, or when I'm swimming laps in the pool, or I'm I'm like trying to find a new like direction and purpose for my life. You know, like I felt like it's almost like I wish I was an artist, or like an actor, or a software engineer or something, where I could have built on that mountain that I built for the rest of my life, you know. But now the mountain is gone and there's like a little anthill, and I'm just like, what? But I was no, but this anthill sucks. I don't want that. I want that. I want that back. You know.
Yeah, this
It's hard.
reminds me of
It's really hard.
something inspirational I heard when I was 14. I was at a camp at the Olympic Training Center, and there's an Olympian there, Josh Davis, back in the, I think,
Yeah.
96, 2000, former American record holder. And he
Yeah.
said something really profound that I
You
still
spent some time in
think about.
Austin too,
That's
right? Right
right.
where you
Yeah,
are.
that's right, where I
Yeah.
live now, yeah. But he was giving a talk one day, and he said, he was talking about like bigger picture faith and what you believe in and kind of core values. And he said that everybody puts their faith in something. Make sure that what you put your faith in is worthy of it. And I took that to mean, and I think about that now in life, that there are many things we can attach our identity to, but some of them will be really unhealthy or will really let us down. And so if you put your identity and put your faith in something to define you that's not that great, then you're going to get, at some point later on in life, you're going to really regret it. And so it's made me think a lot about evaluating How do I define myself? What are the things that are bigger than me that I believe in, that I aspire to pursue in life, and just make sure that it's worthy of putting that kind of devotion and effort into. And still something some days it feels attainable and I have some insights, and some days I don't. But I like that because it is easy in this search to find meaning and purpose and to overcome challenging things, just to pursue something that may not be that meaningful. And I don't want to, live with that regret one day because I found out that I attached myself to the wrong thing that was unhealthy and toxic.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So maybe a last question here I wanted to ask. I know that your very last race was kind of meaningful right before you retired in 2016. I was curious if you wanted to share any thoughts about that and any takeaways from that last race and your experience.
So I believe you're referring to the Traversée du Lac Saint-Jean, the 32K race across Lac Saint-Jean. It's actually a FINA Grand Prix event, which I referred to earlier. And it's about 3 hours north of Montreal. So it's in Quebec. And Lac Saint-Jean is a huge lake. And it's not even close to like all the way across the widest part. It's actually, if it's kind of like this shape, it's kind of across here. So it just tells you how big of a lake it is. It is very, it's relatively shallow, but it's really big. And there's a lot of there's a lot of glacier melt and snow melt that comes down the Parabonka River, goes through this lake, and then goes out another part. But the real story here is that when I won that 25K in 2010, where I was kind of jockeying with this guy to the finish that beat me up or whatever the year before, that was hosted by a town called Roberval, which is a town of about 10,000 people maybe. It's like everything around here is very, very green. It's a lot of farmland, agriculture, very, very low population density. Right? Roberval hosted their world championships because they have this little marine stadium and they've got all the infrastructure for like a swimming course, not because they were hosting the world championships that year, but because for the 60 something years before that, they hosted an event, the Traversée, that became like the Super Bowl for the people that in the area. Like it's the most bizarre thing, right? Because it's in the middle of nowhere. There's more cows than people, kind of thing, and yet every year before the Traversée, they take like 2 weeks off of work. They get drunk during the day. They party. They have barbecues in their yards. On the few days before the event, they line like a whole mile of the main downtown street, or like half a mile maybe, with foldable tables and then like everyone, the whole town, like, and then like really not just the town, everyone in like the surrounding area, everyone comes to Roberval during this event and during the lead up to this event because it's such a big thing, and they have dinner together. Like everyone it's like bring your own food, and like the whole community, the greater community is like just breaking bread together, which is pretty cool. Like in celebration or in anticipation of this event that's been going on for a really long time. And it took a long time to get to that point, right? Like there was just some crazy guy named Jacques Amiot who decided one day to swim from the mouth of the Parabonka River over to Roberval, and it just became a thing, right? So back in the day, it was like Wimbledon of marathon swimming, right? It was like the granddaddy. Like if you won Lac Saint Jean, you are the man, right? Like that is the one race that everyone wants to win. It meant that much to the athletes, and it meant a lot to the people there. They were like very, very proud of this tradition that they have. And just the whole scene and the whole vibe there is like, where are we right now? Like, there's so many people, there's so much energy here. There's so many people. There's like, it's crazy. Anyway, in 2010, after I won the 25K in Roberval, it was like a week later that they had the 32K, the Traverse Day. And because I won the 25K, they invited me. And I'm like, dude, I just won the 25K World Championship, and I have to race in Pan Pacs in a month to try to earn my stipend. That's the race where I got food poisoning and Fran swam backwards to get me. I was like, I can't swim a 32K right now. Are you kidding me? Like, I just did this and I have this to do. Like, I'm sorry. But at the time, I didn't really realize like what the event really was and like how much it meant, both historically and personally, to some people that I cared a lot about and looked up to, especially Paul Asmuth. So Paul, if you really want to know a lot about Paul, you should read his book that just came out. It's called I'll have to send you a link, but it basically is about his swimming career and his trials and tribulations, of which there are just as many, if not more, than mine. Probably a lot more, actually. It's called Marathon Swimming: The Sport of the Soul. That's what it's called. It's a fantastic. It's a really great read, even if you don't care anything about swimming. It's really, really well done, and I know he worked really hard on it. And of course, there's a chapter about me in there called Alice's Magnum Opus, which is a great way of putting what it was. But anyway, Paul was and still is like a really big mentor of mine, and I look up to him a lot. And he, back in the 80s and even into the 90s a little bit, was like on top of the game of marathon swimming. Like, he was winning all these big races and setting records, and he won like at that time they had like, they didn't have a world championships, but they had a circuit. It was essentially the winner was the world champion. He won that like 7 times in a row or something crazy like that. Anyway, he won Lac St. John in 1983 and 89, I believe. It also has an interesting relationship with Lac St. John because I won't get into it too much, but it holds a lot of personal significance to Paul as well. And I was kind of oblivious to this at the time. And after that summer, I always just kind of wished that I had done that. And I always felt like a little tinge of regret for having declined, especially since I don't even think I finished at Pan Pacs anyway. But I didn't really know what it was at the time. So I guess I can't really blame myself too much, but it was always kind of a bucket list item to do the Traversée. And the joke that, like, when Paul and I talked about it, because Paul kind of egged me on, was like, oh, you should really do Lac St. John this summer. But I always felt like, I can't, dude. I need to train for 10Ks. Like, the training for a 32K versus the 10K, which is going to, like, which is what my livelihood is based around, is completely different. Yeah. And if I train really hard for a 32K and I lose all these 10Ks and don't make any money or make any teams, like, I have to retire. So it was always this really tough thing for me, because there were just things that I felt like I wanted to do that I couldn't because it didn't fit in the schedule, or they were too long, or whatever. So, but the joke, or not really a joke, but it was like, the thing was always, I was like, but maybe someday, but only if you are in my boat. So because it's a point to point, every athlete has their own escort boat, which has a captain, which is randomly selected out of a hat on a stage at night in front of like thousands of people with like a band playing in the back, right? Because this is what happens in Roberval, I guess, at least once a year. And you also have your coach that you get to pick, right? And this person gives you information, they give you moral support, and they give you like your feeds, right? Your nutrition, like your liquid nutrition, which for a 32K race is a 6 hour and change race. For a fast one, you need to water's not going to cut it. So anyway, that was always kind of a thing. And basically in 2015, I knew that I was not going to make the team for Rio. And I actually missed at our trials. I got third, which top two, we're going to go to world championships to try to get top 10 to make the team. I got third by like a fraction of a second by making a mistake that I like never make. It was like one of those things where like my bread and butter was coming into the finish side by side with someone like this. And 99 times out of 100, like I will touch first. Like that was my thing that I was good at. And this one time I just botched it, like I was really devastated. And especially, but I kind of held on to hope because I was like, well, if neither of these guys qualify in Kazan, then I have a second chance next year. Anyway, they both qualified. Good for them. But at that point, I kind of like had to kind of face the music in terms of like, all right, what am I doing here? Because it's summer of 2015. Rio's in a year. I didn't make it. Like, I wasn't, like I said before, like you don't really consider plan B until like you really have to. So I was kind of like, well, what do I do now? But that's when I just felt like this, like I need to cross off this bucket list item, which is Lac St. John. And like that, I've always wanted to do it. I've never been able to. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to people that mean a lot to me. And I asked Paul, I said, Paul, if I do Lac St. John next year, would you be my coach? And he said, absolutely. So that was it. So that was my decision. So I took the following year really to train for that. And actually in the meantime, I had a couple really good 10Ks. I felt like I was, and I won a couple World Cups too. And I was like partly still pissed that I didn't make the Rio team, but like, because I was having some really good results in 10Ks. But whatever. I was really excited about Lac St. John. And once and the other cool thing was, so Lac St. John it's really cold lake. Like it's notorious for just really, really frigid temperatures. Mostly due to like the amount of snow that's just melting and coming down that river. Like it gets hot there in the summer, but the water is really cold. So this was all, so I get like, I'm a pretty sentimental guy. Like I just wanted to, I knew this was going to be the end of my career. And I kind of wanted to like bookend it in a way that just like, it just tied it all up neatly and nicely. And I could just kind of like leave it there and just kind of move on in peace. And it's just like, comes full circle. It all makes sense. It's all part of a story that almost like that you would write kind of thing. And now it's over and done with and I'm moving on with my life. And part of that was, what I really consider the beginning of my career was 2010 in Roberval when I won that 25K, which is where the Lac St. John, the Traverse finishes, which is in the very same, literally the exact same spot. The other thing was when I was like 12 years old, my coach Roy brought us up to this camp called Camp Chicopee in outside of Toronto in a small ass town called Magnetawan, which is like Roberval in the middle of nowhere. And it's right on Amic Lake. And it was founded by someone named Matt Mann along like many decades ago. He was actually one of the first coaches, not the first, for the University of Michigan, built a legendary program. Like John Urbanchek, I think, swam for Matt Mann kind of thing. So very steeped in like swimming tradition. And there was a lot of, it was like a summer camp for swimmers. It's a little bit more like regular summer camp now, even though summer camp is kind of like a dying, not many people do that anymore. I don't feel like it, at least when I was a kid, and definitely when my dad was a kid, he was big into summer camp. So anyway, I went there for a couple weeks one summer, and I actually did my first open water race ever in Amic Lake from the girls' camp across the lake, which is called Accomack, to some other like random harbor on the lake, and I won it. And I was like, it was kind of like, along with the stories about Claire DeBoer, it was kind of like one of those early sparks for like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. Maybe partially because I like, at one point I got lily pads in between my hands. Or like I got them like stuck in between these fingers right here. And I was just like swimming with lily pads. It was like, nice. It's like I'm using paddles. But anyway, so I felt like that, and I needed to train for cold water, right? So this just worked perfectly because I'm like, oh, I'm going to go back to this camp where I went as a 12-year-old, where I did my first open water race. I'm going to coach these young kids here and try to inspire and motivate them, whatever. And also get some cold water training in, because that's what I need to prepare for this event. And it was an awesome experience. Like, I just being with like these young people who were just like at the beginning of their journeys was just like really inspiring. And I think that they looked up to me a lot because I had done some stuff in swimming, and you know, they I think appreciated me being there, and I appreciated being allowed to be there, and to have the opportunity to you know, make a small impression on some of these young kids. But the one thing that didn't go that great was the water was actually not that cold. So I didn't quite get the adaptation from being there for like 3 weeks that I was hoping that I would, which caused problems for me once I got to Loch St. John, because that water was really cold. And after about a half hour into the race, I started like shivering a little bit, which is like time to start picking up the pace, because if you're shivering, you're already halfway there, and to like basically blue lips and hypothermia and all that stuff. So like, you better start picking it up. So I tried to pick it up, but like the sun went behind the clouds, and it was just absolutely miserable. It was the coldest I've been ever in my life. And I don't think ever have I wanted to quit a race that badly. I was so cold. But like, I felt like I had everything riding on this, right? Like I built this whole story around this whole thing, and it's supposed to be my swan song, and my, like, I was supposed to go out with a bang here, and it's gonna mean so much to me and to other people that like have helped me along the way. And like, no, I can't fail. I can't get out. So but it got to the point where I was like, dude, swim for 2 more minutes, and then you can get out. So I'd swim for 2 more minutes, and then I'd get there and be like, all right, just swim for 2 more minutes, you can get out. And I'd do that. And then I just repeated that for like 3 hours, or for like 2.5 hours, to the point where also I couldn't pee again, because like when I already have a hard enough time with it. And when you're really cold, it makes it even harder. And making it even worse is that you excrete more urine in cold temperatures, because when you're really hot, your body is like, oh no, I need to retain liquid, because I'm sweating, right? So don't excrete water, like keep it in. Whereas with cold, you're not quite sweating as much, and your body is like, let's just like flush it out. So it was really, really, that was like really challenging. And I was just like having a miserable time. And Paul did a great job of trying to encourage me and everything, and like heating up my feeds with hot water and all that stuff. And finally, it just like, it got to after the race, he told me at one point, he was like, I was really, really concerned. Like, I was almost about to pull you out, because you were starting to, it was starting to remind him of, basically, he passed out in Loch St. John back in the 80s. Really? And fortunately, someone was there to grab him, unlike Fran, right? Yeah. So he's already feeling like, God, like, like maybe I should take charge here and just put a stop to this, because this is not good. But eventually, like at one point, it was just like the sun kind of came out, and I started feeling better, and I picked up my pace. I was able to like relieve myself a little bit. I started getting my kick going. I got my stroke rate up. Like things started coming around, and I finally just I don't know if it was like divine intervention or sheer willpower or just meteorology or what, but like it everything just kind of came together and I started feeling good again. And I eventually just like, you know what, screw this pack. I'm running away with this thing. I'm gonna win this freaking race. And it was like me and one other guy, Eduardo Stocchino, who actually ironically was one of the guys that was kind of at the front for a while in that race in 2010, that 25K. So I have raced against him a bunch of times. He's a pretty nice guy. But I just remember there, and then there were two other things that happened. Like as we got closer and closer, I kind of eventually broken away from Stocchino, but it just like I saw at one point this boat. So their cool thing about this event is that because so many people know that it's going on, it starts really. We think we started at like 6 a.m. or something, but everyone knows it's happening, and a lot of people up there have boats. So as you go through the day, more and more boats just like they're just people and their little motorboats like just coming like just cruise along next to you just to watch the race because it's like it's an institution for them. And by like with an hour to go there were like 200 boats probably. Like all I would look up and all I could see was boats, and I was like, wow, I have never felt this much like Tom Brady in my life. Like this is awesome. It was such a cool experience. And at one point, like this one boat came up who I later found out was actually the guy whose house I was living in, who's like my host basically, Sebastian, with a big ass American flag on the front. And I was just like, no way. Hell yes, yes. That like fired me up so much. And I was so pumped up by that. And I was and I was like, man, this is all like, and it was almost like my whole life and like career just like, flashed before my eyes or whatever. It's like, this moment is like what it's all coming together. Like, I deserve this. Like, I worked so hard for this, and like, this is awesome. And then at one point, like when I was just like, I'm just like swimming fast. I don't even need to swim fast, but I'm just like feeling good. And just my shoulder hurts like hell, but like I'm like kind of limping, like swimming, but I'm just like cruising along. And Paul pulls out this like sign. He's got this little whiteboard marker board to tell me like so and so is behind you, or so and so is in front of you, or like time to feed 5 minutes, whatever. Yeah. And he was like it said something like sun is with you, waves are with you, and family is with you. Wow. And I was like, Paul, you're gonna make me fucking cry like while I'm actually can you wait till the end for that? And I was like, it just that like just the way everything came together, it was like honestly it meant more to me than like an Olympic medal probably ever could. So, in the end it all and I won the race. So in just a few minutes short of record time too, which of course, I was a little ticked off about that, but
for almost,
not for long.
Freezing of hypothermia, I guess you can give yourself a break there.
Yeah. And the thing is that actually the guy who had the record, who I have a lot of respect for, and I'm sure is a really nice guy, but I had like a little beef with him. I think it was earlier that spring because one of his swimmers totally screwed up the end of my race by like swimming over the top of me. And I was like going to win the last 10K of my career. And this like, he was a relatively young, he's actually really, really good now. He's winning World Cups. He's really good swimmer, French guy. But he totally screwed up my race, and I got really pissed off at him. And I gave him a few of these before we crossed the finish line, and I did not apologize because, like, dude, like that you learn the etiquette here, and so, but like, and his coach was like giving me a hard time. Stefan Lacotte, and he had the record. So I always like, I'm like, not only am I going to beat the crap out of your swimmer, but I'm going to beat the crap out of your record in Lac St. John in July too. But I didn't. But anyway, if you're listening to this, Stefan, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry I was a little bit of a jerk. I was in the heat of the moment, and I apologize, and I do respect you. But anyway, that's the end of the kind of the Lac St. John story. And I had a few friends there and some family, and Tim Murphy was there. He came all the way up, and last minute too, because he actually told me the day before. He's like, I'm really sorry, I can't make it. Like he had I think a meet or something like that, but he decided like last minute. He's like, I can't not be there. So he drove up through the middle of the night to be there, and it meant the world to me. And then like I'm sitting in the recovery room, like in blankets, like recovering, shivering, and like Paul walks in, and Paul was just super proud. And one of the interesting things was the captain whose name I drew out of the hat, Paul also had as a captain in 1983 when he won. So it was so his name was Francois Bouillet. And it's just like in like so many ways, it all just kind of came together and just like had this really fitting end. And I'm just like so grateful for that. It's a good story, I think, maybe to some people, but it's like, to me, it's like it was perfect.
Yeah,
really.
that's cool.
And if it was just an easy race, that wouldn't have been that cool, right? Like, yeah, I just took off from the starting line, and I won by a mile. Like, no, that's not what makes life interesting.
That's right. It's the ups and the downs and the hardship and the suffering that really makes there be meaning and purpose in the end.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I'm glad that that's how you're able to go out and you're able to end on that note, and that's got to be something that you'll remember forever. For
sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for spending some time with me and telling me about all the stuff. As I always do, I'd love to end just with one last question. I know I've asked you a bunch of personal questions and dug into your life. Do you have any questions for me or anything that you want to just kind of end on?
Well, yeah, I was kind of actually wondering. So when we chatted a few weeks ago about just kind of like how to do this, setting this all up, I think you expressed that you got in a way the result that you wanted, but in a way it felt a little empty because you couldn't countersue for some of your legal expenses, and it kind of, even though you could keep the brand alive, that along with, COVID kind of had a detrimental effect on the business at the end of the day. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what's the moral of the story there? Like, what is, like, what's the fix? Like, was that right? Was that the right decision, or was that the right fair ending, or like, is it do you have any perspective or recommendations on like how the system should be set up differently so that like what I assume, like what seems to me to be an unfair result doesn't happen again? Or is it kind of like the what's the Winston Churchill quote, like democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried? It's some, that kind of thing. Like, is there a fix for this kind of thing that like in terms of policy or laws that you have an opinion on, or where do you stand on that? Like given what happened, like how should we, like, what's the fix here, or what's the solve so that this doesn't happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've definitely thought about that for a bit. And just kind of to recap what my experience was like, my small business, Thunder Beast, was involved in a 4-year lawsuit. And at the end, I retained my trademark. I was able to stay in business and really felt like I'd won this huge moral victory against this huge company. But financially, it was devastating. And I actually was really angry for a long time because it was the judge who ruled, which seemed unfair to me, but ruled that I wasn't able to countersue, get any damages, get any legal fees covered, and that really was difficult for any sort of settlement negotiation or concluding the lawsuit. It really felt like all the power had been taken away from me as the little guy, the one person business trying to stand up to the Goliath. And so that really bothered me for a long time. It felt so unfair because the whole time I've been pushing and fighting for what's felt like a principle that was so right. And I met all these other small businesses and other people who felt like they were suffering from a similar legal system that was weighted toward big companies getting to do whatever they wanted and throw their weight around. And so that was tough. But something that I concluded from that was really that there are a lot of things in life that are not fair. And many of us simply will not receive what we feel is true justice in the world. But that's beyond our control, and the thing that is in our control is how we respond. And I think the fact that the Fight Monsters organization came out of that challenging experience for me and has allowed me to have just a number of conversations with people who have gone through much more challenging things than I have, or just been through different life experiences and faced some really hard monsters. It's taught me that there's a lot of power and beauty in just trying to be honest and genuine and connecting with other people and fighting to become a better and stronger person. And though many of us may not get what we feel like is justice, no one exists, no monster exists that can keep me or you or anyone else from growing into a better and stronger person through your adversity. Monsters are not capable of taking that away from us. And to me, that is really inspiring. And I think it was only going through a hard process that I truly learned that I really can take responsibility for my future. And I can't control everything. Some things will be hard and unfair, but I can choose to become a better and stronger person, and I can help other people try to be healthier and try to give them a boost and learn from them. And to me, it's slowly taking the sting out of it. I still have some days where I feel angry or just feel like the whole situation was unfair, and I wrestle with those emotions. But I'm beginning to feel more optimistic about the future. And I really do think that when hard and bad things happen, that there can be new life and kind of a rebirth and redemption in the future. And that's more what my focus is on now, is the good things ahead. And I'm trying not to think so much about the challenges behind.
That's great. You can have that perspective, and it's absolutely the right one, and easier said than done.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah.
That's right. Well, yeah.
Well, we're proud. I know I'm proud of you for fighting the good fight, and I followed. I think there were a few emails around and some, like, within our little HMSD community and stuff like that, and maybe some stuff from you as well. I may not have expressed it verbally, but I was like, had your back through all that, and I think you did the right thing by standing up to it and fighting for what's right. So, yeah.
Thanks, man. It means a lot.
I can't say that I would have had the balls to do the same thing, So I know a lot of people would not have. So,
yeah,
incredibly ballsy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's nothing like being faced with an impossible situation, or seemingly impossible situation, to have to really dig down and figure out who you are and learn about yourself and face what it means to maybe fail for a good reason. And I think that's what it came down to for me is, would I rather have an easier and simpler life but compromise core value, or would I rather go out, both guns blazing, but really stand for my conviction and try to fight for other people and on their behalf? And so, yeah, I'm still a little bit sad or angry or bitter sometimes about the outcome, but I don't regret it, and I would do it again, definitely. But I think in years down the road, more good things will happen as a result, and I feel good about that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Thanks so much for being a part of the podcast. It's great to have you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, it's great to catch up and see you.
Fight Monsters is a non-profit public advocacy organization that promotes the awareness of bullying in all forms.
Conditioned to make your mental beat like a drum with a beat to the heart and a beat to the chest, and he can't take no more. I fight against bullying in all forms. Fight monsters, fight monsters. You're listening to the Fight Monsters podcast.